Hi, welcome to this week's video. I'm Pastor Dave, and it's good to be back with you again this week. You know, I have to admit, I do not watch the Dr. Phil show. But I saw that he had a recent guest on. She became kind of popular. It was a 13-year-old girl who was just, I don't even know how to describe her. You know, rebellious does not describe the attitude and the dynamics that took place with this 13-year-old girl and her mom. So I saw the YouTube clip, and I understand that she was on last fall, and then Dr. Phil arranged for her to go to a treatment center, a cattle ranch basically for kids who are having problems, and then she spent 4 months there, and she came back on the show to say how things were going, and really her attitude really hadn't changed much, and so on and so forth. So the whole show went on, and there was a catchphrase, and people were mocking her and so on and so forth. And when the show was done, the part I saw, the YouTube section that I saw, it was just a sad situation. And it made me think, I was thinking, is this just one girl, or one example, or does this speak louder for a generation that's coming behind us? You know, Scripture tells us that in the very last days, there'll be people whose attitudes will be like that. They will be lovers of themselves, not lovers of God. They will call good things evil and evil things good, and they will be rude and obnoxious and disrespectful to parents, and all these things. They're prideful and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, if that's the way people are going to act and respond as we get closer to the end times, what about this girl? Is it just one bad apple, or is she an example of the whole bushel? So I started doing some research and digging into it. In America, when you look at youth rebellion, you know, the very first generation that was called or considered to be in rebellion goes back to the 1950s, which kind of surprised me somewhat. You see, up until 1950, basically, the term youth wasn't even used. Kids went to school when they could, and they went out and they got jobs, and they brought money into their families, and during World War II, they were out, you know, helping mom make a living so the family could eat while dad was off at war. And it was a different culture, a different lifestyle. And as kids grew up, they were expected to be polite. They were expected to dress nice. As far as music and things, whatever music the parents listened to, the kids grew up listening to, and they listened to it as well. But in the 1950s, that all changed because of something called rock and roll. And what happened was teenagers began to have their own opinions. Teenagers began to wear different style clothing. And teenagers began to listen to this new style of music, this new type of music. And the older generation considered all three of those things as rebellious. And we had that term being used for the first time since 1950. And it's interesting because when you move past that from the 50s into the 60s and 70s, it gets only worse. You know, I was able to find some reports that teachers were actually complaining about what was going on in schools when kids were being obnoxious or being in trouble or being a troublemaker in school, when they were rebellious in school. What was the rebellion? Well, in the 1950s, there were 7 things that teachers filed reports on. The number one issue that the teachers had with kids back in the 1950s was smoking in the bathroom. So kids would go off and sneak out and have a cigarette in the bathroom. Number 2 was skipping school. Number 3 was talking in class. The 4th thing that the teachers had problems with was chewing gum. And the 5th one was fireworks. That one I don't quite understand, but somehow fireworks did something in the classroom or on campus, and the teachers had a problem with that. So chewing gum, fireworks, and then dress code violations. And the 7th thing that the teachers had issues with students was carving their names in desks. So smoking in the bathroom, skipping school, talking in class, chewing gum, fireworks, dress code violation, and carving their initials in the desk. That's the 1950s. Going into the 1960s. Now those kids who were the rebellious kids in the 50s and 60s, well, they became the parents of the kids in school in the 80s and 90s. And I couldn't find anything for the 2000s, but I could find some reports in the 1990s. What did teachers complain about? What was the issues they had with kids on campus in the 1990s? The number one issue in the 1990s Remember, back in the 50s, it was smoking in the bathroom. In the 1990s, it was drug use on campus. So they went from smoking cigarettes in the bathroom to drug use on campus. The second greatest problem in 1990s that the teachers were filing reports on was alcohol abuse. We went from kids skipping school in the 50s to alcohol abuse in the 90s, just one generation later. The third problem, remember, it was talking in class. Well, in the 1990s, it was students assaulting teachers. Students assaulting teachers. We went from talking in the classroom to assaulting teachers. And the fourth one was chewing gum. They were told not to chew gum in the class in the 1950s. In the 1990s, and again, this is still 20 years ago, it was rape, both on campus and off campus, the fourth greatest problem on our schools. The fifth was robbery, the sixth was extortion, and the seventh problem that the teachers had with students in the 1990s was weapons violation. We went from carving our names in the desk to weapons violations. You know, it just makes me think where we're at in the end times. It makes me think, what's the next generation like? This 13-year-old, I don't know, call her a young lady or a little girl, what she was, but her obnoxious behavior, her violent behavior, is that just one bad apple? Or does that speak for the generation that's about to come, where we're told in the end times people will have these kinds of attitudes and behave this way? It's just kind of food for thought, because it's a sad situation on where our schools are. Now, I realize there's some wonderful kids out there, there's some great kids out there, that this does not speak for everybody, but is this more the minority or more the majority as far as some of these issues? And look how much they've changed in just one generation. Hey, that's the video for this week. Wanted to give you something to think about. If you have any thoughts or questions or want to interact with me, you can do so. Once again, my name is Pastor Dave, and the website is called interpretingthetimes.com. If you Google that, it's all one word, interpretingthetimes.com. Thanks again for being with me. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again next week. God bless.